Welcome back to another episode. I'm ranking them up here. And today from Canada, we have Marcel from Parakeeto. Am I saying that right?
You are.
Oh, good. Good. And he's wearing, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to see he's actually wearing a shirt as well. And Marcel and I met last week, basically a few weeks ago at the Digital Agency Expo, the digital marketer event in New York City. And he was really kind to stand up and ask a question after my talk. And he said, will you come on my podcast? And I was like, absolutely. And I went, only if you come on my podcast. So Marcel is here and he has a really interesting background. Coming from a retail background with Apple, you had some ups and downs and ventures in the entrepreneurial world. You were also a fitness advocate like me with your CrossFit coaching and your weightlifting. And so you have a really interesting background, Marcel. I'm just dying to hear about how did you actually go from Apple and CrossFit into this world of agency? Tell us some more.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I remember the day that I left my job at Apple, and there was some inklings. I think a lot of people that have had a really great job have kind of, especially early in their careers, a lot of people that are listening, I'm sure in the creative space, I hear this story over and over again, right? Of the agency owner that has a great job at a great agency, and there's just still this kind of gaping hole in their soul. And I thought, I was in my early 20s and I thought this is everything I've ever wanted. And I still felt empty inside. And then I looked at, what my boss was doing and I saw that that was my career path. And I knew that I just really didn't want to do that. And so I remember the day that I left that job, I was offered a promotion and it really just hit me like, the reason I want to be successful is so that I can be there for the people that I care about and spend time with them and provide for them. And this job was going to take me away from them. And I was going to have to travel a lot more. And I realized that I just didn't want that anymore. So I remember I called my father and I said, hey, Dad, I think that I want to quit my job at Apple and start a business. And I expected him to tell me not to be an idiot. But he said, you know what? When I was your age, I would have wanted to do the same thing. And I didn't have the guts to do it. So I support you 100%. You can sleep on my couch till you turn 30 and swing for the fence. I believe in you. And that was kind of the moment where I decided it was time to give it a try. I had nothing to lose. So I went on a journey of, like most people, trying and failing at a bunch of things, had a bunch of ideas, picked up part-time jobs to pay the bills. One of the things that I did was I started an agency. Actually, we were doing virtual reality services for real estate agents. And I figured out very quickly that real estate agents are very cheap people and I couldn't make enough money selling them services to scale it. I would have always had to be the person doing the photos going into the house because I wouldn't have had enough margin to build the business. That's when I really started learning about the unit economics of services. And that's part of the reason why I got out of that industry. And then kind of started exploring other ideas and then started developing relationships with some pretty incredible mentors that I was very fortunate to start spending time with. And they all happened to be in the software space. And I learned a lot about why the software space was one of the most challenging industries to go into, but also potentially one of the most rewarding. And I said to myself, well, I want to take the biggest risk possible and challenge myself the most that I can at this point. And I'd rather do that and come up with nothing and learn a lot than do something easier and just kind of land in the middle of the pack. So that's when I kind of dove into software products, spent a few years working on different ideas, and then I eventually got a phone call from a good friend of mine, Jared, who runs an agency, and he told me about this problem that he had in his business, and the rest is history. That's how we started building Parakeeto.
And what does Parakeeto actually like? Because this is kind of slightly different. Tell us about what Parakeeto does and the kind of structure of your agency, because it's slightly different from what we normally talk about.
Right. So Parakeeto is a software product, and it helps agencies and service businesses answer their most important operations questions without wasting time on spreadsheets. And this is really a reaction to a problem that we had running our own agency when I was starting out. And then Jared, my business partner today, has in his agency, where if he wants to figure out, am I making money on a project? Do I have capacity for new work? what are my most profitable services, that requires the building of a spreadsheet, because that data is usually, in a bunch of different tools that he's using to run the business. And so we started talking to other agency owners to figure out if other people had this problem too. And we figured out that a lot of people really do have it. So we set out to build a platform that sits in between those things that you use every day, like time tracking and project management and accounting, brings that data together and answers those questions for you without the need for spreadsheets. And it really just helps you get insight into what's going on in your business so you can make better decisions and be more successful.
Nice. Yeah, that huge question about capacity forecasting, specifically when is the right time to hire, is a huge question I get asked all the time. When do I hire a salesperson? When do I hire an account manager? And you're taking that what if guesswork, that kind of finger in the air sort of thing that goes on, and actually making it a reality. So do you wrap services around that, what you the software that you sell as well? Because I know you do speak and consult in the area of agency profitability optimization. So it's not just the software, you're offering services as well. Is that correct? Or is it
that? Yeah, that is correct. I think, like a lot of software companies, we look for inventive ways to create a minimum viable product. And in our case, that just ended up being building the spreadsheets for agencies that don't have the spreadsheet yet. And that's kind of what we've been doing for the last 2 years, is working with agencies to develop their reporting processes, help them actually get this information in place and work through taking action on that information. And that's really helped us learn a lot about how we can build a better product. And so it's really been a lot of fun doing that. We've learned a lot, and we've helped a few agencies build their profits and get more successful in the process. And then, of course, I've been fortunate enough to get invited on shows like this and speak to other smart people and just talk about what I know. And I feel very fortunate to get the opportunity to do that as well.
Yeah, I saw we did a walkthrough of the tool yesterday, and obviously working with Joachim, who's also in Grow It, he's exposed a whole world of finances and profitability knowledge that I have never ever been a part of before. I think I learned more in the first week working with Joachim about numbers than I did in the 4.5 years I've been in HubSpot, only because that's not the priority. The numbers are over here. And it was fascinating to see what you are able to solve there, as opposed to logging into lots of different products and lots of different software tools. It's actually able to see it into one. But you are still, at the end of the day, you're a professional services business. So you've got all the same challenges. You must be learning and growing as you go. You have some advice there about some of the numbers. Like, what are the 3 most important numbers that every agency should be tracking? Of course, Parakeeto is something that they can get to. But let's just say it is a spreadsheet for the moment, or they're running their tools and their data box. What are the 3 numbers that they should be looking at?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, the thing is, to your point, for most agencies today, a spreadsheet is all you really need in order to start getting a lot more insight into your business. And it's really just about having the discipline to gather these numbers and look at them on a regular basis. But no matter what kind of services you sell, whether it's websites, marketing funnels, or if you're selling landscaping or building houses, if you trade human hours for dollars, then you need to track 3 important numbers. And another caveat that I'll just put out there before I get started, because I think when I start talking about these things, the same objections always come up. Well, I don't bill for time. We don't track time. Doesn't matter how you bill. If you're listening, you could be billing flat rates. You could be billing flat monthly fees, traditional retainers, time and materials. You could be renting humans out on as part of like a fractional team. No matter how you're billing, whether it's value-based, the same economic levers are applied to your business because of your business model. So these are the 3 numbers. Number 1 is your capacity.
Yeah.
And your capacity is essentially defined by how much work can you sell. And that's a function of how much time you can sell. And that is a result of how many people do you have on your team, and what does their work life look like? How often are they coming to work? How much of that time do you expect them to be working on billable stuff? How many vacation days do they get? Etc. So figuring out your capacity really helps you understand how much work can I take on at any given moment, and really how much revenue can I earn in any given period of time based on the types of services that I offer, who's able to provide those within my company, and what I charge for those services. So capacity is number 1. And it's very simple to figure that out. It's really just building a spreadsheet of who's on the team, how much do they work, what kind of stuff do they do, and what do we bill out for that. And that really helps you figure out, for any given period of time, what you can do there. The second one is utilization. And that's really simply how much of that time is actually getting used to work on client work. And a lot of people get billable utilization confused because, again, I think there's a lot of old school thinking around time tracking that implies that time tracking is supposed to be used to figure out how much we should be billing to the client. But I believe that especially now in 2019, where very few companies are billing for time, which is good. I don't think people really should bill for time. A lot of the cases, it's not a very efficient way to increase the amount of money that you can make on a project. But I think everybody should be tracking time for their own internal insights and to make their, their projects more profitable, to give their team a better work-life balance, to do better resource planning. For all of those reasons, I think it's important to note that billable time is not time that's being charged to the client per se. It's just a question of understanding how much time does it actually take us to get value to the client. So if you say, we're going to build a website in 100 hours and you track 200 against that, whether you're getting paid for those extra 100 hours or not, you should know that it took you an extra 100 hours to get there, because that's how you learn to get more efficient in the business at earning revenue. So utilization is all of the time that's spent working for clients, period. That's it. Right. And that's as a percentage generally of your gross capacity, which for most employees is 2,080 hours a year. And some benchmarks around that: most agencies on an annual basis are going to end up somewhere in a net range of 65 to 75%. So after vacation and holidays and internal meetings, et cetera, you should expect your team to be spending between 65 and 75% of their time actually doing client work. Lower than that, it can become challenging to maintain healthy profit margins.
Yeah, that's great. I was I was waiting with bated breath there when I was like, oh, what's he going to say? I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, 70% is what we aim for. 75 once you kind of get the models right. And what's the third number then? So capacity utilization.
So after utilization and capacity, you have your last one, which is your average billable rate, which is really just a simple way to assess profitability at any level of the business. An average billable rate is easily defined as how much money your company makes for every hour your team spends doing client work. So that's really easy to get to as a calculation. You take your adjusted gross income, which is your revenue as a business after you remove all pass-through expenses. So this would be things like printing budgets and ad spend and contractors, freelancers, website templates, whatever's passing through you and onto somebody else. And you look at just the amount of revenue that's retained for you and your team for the work that you're doing, and you divide that amount of revenue by the number of hours that were worked by your team. And that gets you to your average billable rate. And the reason that that's an important number is because I talk to a lot of agency owners and I ask them, hey, what's your average billable rate? And when they hear that, they say, oh, we charge $150 an hour. I think that's awesome. But how much do you actually make? Because often the numbers are very different. Sometimes it's lower, sometimes it's higher. But knowing your average billable rate really helps you understand, number one, what is your true revenue earning capacity? Number two, how efficient are you at actually delivering results to clients and hitting the budgets and expectations that you're setting for yourself? And finally, if you start to segment this by client, by project, or even by task or service line within a project, you can start to get really, really valuable insight about what parts of the business you actually need to focus on to decrease the amount of times that you go way over budget, to get better at estimating projects, to get better at planning your resources so that you can just protect your team's time and not, basically be throwing money out the window when you start to go off the rails on projects more consistently.
Yeah, and I hear this a lot from agency owners, especially when they're coming to teaching their team about time tracking. And they say things to me like, oh, I just can't get my team to track their time. Or they say they don't understand that time tracking is important, or they're not consistent with it. Have you any techniques on helping embed that? I have a couple of ideas, but I think that's a big challenge I hear. How can you help agencies help their team understand the importance of time?
Yeah. So I think there's a few things here, but the biggest thing is I think it's misunderstood by a lot of people, and employees are often going to get the impression that time tracking means like Big Brother is watching over me. People want to know exactly what I'm doing. And for some agency owners, that is the reason they want to install it. And unfortunately, that's the case for them. But to me, the biggest value for time tracking is that it improves resource planning and it avoids people having to work evening and weekends if you get good at it and you use the data for the right reasons. That is the number one priority for me when I'm installing time tracking. Is the data is primarily for us being used to get better at scoping, so that when we plan what a project is going to look like. We can learn exactly where we're screwing up, get better at figuring out how much time it actually takes to do something, install better processes to make sure that it becomes more consistent. And in turn, that allows us to do better resource planning that's actually going to have fewer errors in it and avoid the situations where we misscope this and you got to work through the weekend to get it done because, well, the deadline is on Monday. And that is probably the biggest benefit that employees are going to get. Beyond that, if they have a compensation plan tied to the success of the business, well, almost always you're going to increase your profitability if you're actually effectively using the time tracking data to get better. So there's other benefits there, but fundamentally, that's the reason that I think everyone should be on board with it. And if you're using it right, you should be using it in that way.
Yeah, and that's great. Those are great tips as well. And I'll add another couple that I do with agency owners is you have to explain to your team business fundamentals about running a professional services business. Because I think what happens is the team sees a $5,000 or a $6,000 retainer coming in the door. And in their head, they go, God, the agency owner must be making a load of money because I'm only getting paid, you know, like $4,000 or whatever. And they can see 10, $6,000 retainers coming in. So they have this sort of thing where, you know, you must be making loads of money. So one of the things I always suggest to agency owners is go through the exercise of sharing your P&L. Now, group the wages into one pile. You're not going to specifically tell what everyone's on. But if you put a P&L up about how much software costs, how much the building costs, if you're a good agency, you have team building events, you might have tea and coffee. You know, all of these things come from profit. And profit comes from happy clients, you know, doing your work. So if you can link it to, you know, you want these things, you want these team building things, that comes from me knowing that I'm profitable. So if they can make that about themselves, it really helps, and educate them about how a business works, how a professional services business works. And when it's them, they kind of go, oh, hang on, I'm responsible for my time. They get smarter and more efficient, and they invest in themselves, and they will contribute to that time tracking in a much more sort of a friendly way, like they're involved in it, as opposed to the big brother thing that you were just mentioning there. So that's really good stuff. Now there's some tip that you have about, like, let's talk about the profitability side of things. A small change in the profitability can have a massive impact on your business valuation. A lot of mergers and acquisitions going on with agencies right now. I have actually got a podcast and episode and a YouTube video about how to value your agency. But talk to me more about how you see this in your profitability and business valuations.
Yeah, I mean, this is like a thing that blows a lot of people's minds when I talk about it in keynotes. And even when I do audits with agencies, I just did one yesterday, actually, where so there's this exponential effect. So when you can change something like the average billable rate, for example, when you can tweak that a little bit, what's happening there is you're actually making your existing business more efficient. So it gives you the ability to earn more revenue without increasing overhead, without increasing payroll. So what essentially we're trying to architect here when we're looking at profitability is how do we make the current system more efficient at earning revenue? So with this previous client that I just did an audit with, we found that in his business, he had an opportunity for every 1% increase in average billable rate, he would increase his net profits by 6%.
Wow.
So what that meant was, you know, he was earning revenue, I think, at about 50% of his current efficiency capacity. So even if we got him up to 80%, his profit at the end of the year increased by over 350%. So we're talking about almost a $5 million increase in net profit by making, you know, by not even maximizing the potential of his business, just bringing it up to 80%. So there's a compounding effect from, you know, just tweaking utilization or average billable rate to your bottom line. But then the other cool thing about that is when you're selling your agency, most of the time that's a conversation about a multiple on your net profit or your EBITDA. So you're getting a second compounding effect on top of that, because not only is your percentage of profit higher at the end of the year, which is generally going to increase that multiple, the multiple is on a higher number to begin with. So you, again, have an exponential effect there. So a lot of times we're seeing a 1% increase in average billable rate, or, you know, a 1% increase in utilization resulting in an 8, 10, 12, even 15x multiple in terms of value added to the business. So people don't really pay attention to this stuff, but once you start to realize the impact that you can have on your business by actually focusing a little bit more on these numbers, it can be pretty mind-boggling how much it can really move the needle.
Yeah, with that small 1%, and you're not talking about, you know, numbers that they can't achieve. It's just focusing on the right things. I have a prediction for next year and going on beyond. I believe we can get over the 80% utilization rate. Due to the fact that there are definitely tools that are coming and are there. They just need to come into the agency world for marketing AI tools. And this is something I definitely talk about with agencies now. It's like, if you can get your account manager to save 1 hour a week, or your strategist or your salesperson by using one tool, and they save 1 hour a week, and that's now 52 hours throughout the year, I feel that we could get over that 80% and still have really well trained and time for training and learning team members through the use of marketing AI tools. Are there any tools that you are looking at when it comes to that realm?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, the strategy that we look at when we're optimizing a business is we start with, you know, looking at the different services and then tracking time against those to figure out where are the inefficiencies. And then we're informing things based on that. So some of the favorite things that I look at are going to be around workflow automation, because I think that's one of the biggest barriers to getting people into a workflow and getting them locked in when they have to switch from screen to screen a lot, or when they have to remember to follow up with something. That is just generally going to create a lot of inefficiencies. One of the biggest things actually that affects utilization from my experience is what I call client dilution. And what that refers to is when you have a single person that's responsible for working on several different projects at once, oftentimes it can be very difficult for them to stay locked in and have a high utilization rate. So whenever you have a person that is inevitably in a situation like that, installing as much automation as possible so that they can batch tasks together, so that they can still go through a workflow as though they were working on one client, but they can address several clients at a time through each step of that workflow, tends to really impact utilization and allow people to get into flow. And really, it's all about asking yourself, how can we decrease the friction of getting somebody into doing billable work? Once they're doing it, how can we make that process more efficient so they can achieve the same outcomes with less time invested? And then also asking yourself, how can we reduce the amount of times that we're asking people to switch context? Because of course that really hinders productivity. So those are just kind of the hot tips. And then the way that we inform where are we actually going to make those investments to improve process or evaluate different tools, different partners, different whatever, we use the data to inform that by looking at, oh, we're consistently going over budget on websites by 20%. Well, let's start having conversations with the team to figure out why that is and where we can actually make improvements to bring that number back into what we want.
Brilliant. Yeah. You mentioned Inflow there. It's very much a topic that I think is coming to the forefront now. The concept of multitasking. We've tried that. We need to leave that as we move into 2020. We need to leave the concept, not even, and if you hear a woman can multitask, she's saying that, but she's not really doing a lot of things well. And trust me, I know. So I will speak for that. We can do it, but do we do things well? A great book to read if you would like to know more about any of that is one by Cal Newport called Deep Work. I'm just going to make the presumption that Marcel has either heard or read it or done the book summary of it by the fact that he says in flow. So batching tasks, blocking off time. It'll come to me in a second. I just read about an agency who has batched their workday in red, amber, green zones to go red. Nobody talks. Everyone just gets an hour and a half of work done first thing in the morning. Then they take a break, then they go into amber, where there is allowed to be a bit of noise and talking, and then there's green, where they might come together for meetings. I think that's great. So thinking about batching, blocking off time, and getting helping your team to get in flow is going to be really important.
I'm sorry, I didn't actually mention any specific tools, but there's just so many of them out there. Everybody has heard of them. So I just want to address that. I didn't actually answer the question. I don't want everyone to think that I'm like a politician that just like deflects and then says whatever he wants to say.
No, I mean, we could be here forever with the tools. I actually will put a reference to, I found a really good map recently. Well, I'll mention Paul Reitzer's, if you're interested in marketing AI, the Marketing AI Institute, which is all got blogs and courses and everything. But I did find a map, and I'll put it in the notes here for this episode, about if you're looking for customer satisfaction, if you're looking for account management, the actual tools that are available now. And I'll be pleased to tell you, it isn't as overwhelming as the Martech 7000.
Is it up to 8 or 9,000 now? I don't know.
Stop. That thing just makes me weak. And I'm going, oh my God. So it's not as crazy as that yet, but I'm sure we're going to get there. You have some huge goals. Like with Parakeeto, you want to hit over 1,000 agencies and have 15,000 users. Talk to me about what your roadmap is about marketing, and what do you plan to do to grow your business so big?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different avenues. So the cool thing about, and what I believe is so exciting about Parakeeto, is that we're starting today focused on creative agencies, because that's the world that, we kind of come from as founders. We understand that world. We have relationships in that world, and we've been, living in that world for the last 2 years as we build out the product. But this applies to every service business model. So it could apply to people that are doing roofing, landscaping, plumbing, any kind of consulting, professional services, because the business model is the same. And so the economic levers are the same. And so our data model fundamentally can be adapted. So that's exciting to me, because most software companies, they pick a niche, they go into it, and then they kind of max that out. And then you kind of cross the chasm into another vertical niche. And we have the potential to do that all the way through all service businesses, which is like almost a quarter of businesses on the planet have some kind of service base to them or have a service aspect to them. So it's a pretty massive market. Now, in terms of our approach on how we do that, well, to me, it just all kind of starts with building a foundation of authority and relationships by doing stuff like this, just going out and sharing everything that I know about the profitability of agencies, and answering the questions that I'm hearing all the time, and just trying to educate people as much as I can on what they should know, what they should be doing, giving it all away for free. So if you come onto our website, I mean, we're giving away the spreadsheets that do what our software does, knowing that eventually you'll get tired of filling it out, and maybe you'll come back and try our product. And that's really kind of what we're doing to start. And then it's, I'm sure there's lots of people listening, then it's just digital marketing. It's promoting that at the top of the funnel, remarketing to the people that are interested in the problem that we're solving, building a relationship with them through that whole experience, getting on a call with them to figure out if we're a good fit. And if they are, then we enroll them into the product and make them so happy that hopefully they tell all their friends and family about it as well.
Yeah. It's so interesting. A lot of agencies, and I know a lot are listening, they sometimes get very guarded. Sometimes they get really guarded about sharing their pricing. That's one of the challenges I battle through with an agency. Generally end up in a little bit of a fight about, put your pricing up. And I keep nagging them until they do it. And the other one is around sharing. You cannot share enough information about what you do. And my personal belief and what I've seen work over the years, the more you share and the more detail you give, the more overwhelmed the person is and realizes that they need help. Because at the end of the day, if somebody out there, like if you're a digital agency owner and you want to work with a certain type of marketing CMO or a certain type of company, if that person was any good to the level that they would do the work themselves, they would be opening their own agency. So the fact that they're in a job means that there is a lot of other things going on. So keep sharing, keep reassuring. And if you ever wanted to just check out another book that I'll probably recommend over and over again is from Marcus Sheridan, his new and improved version of, they ask, we answer. Like, just do those videos about the questions that people need answering, and just keep doing that, which I think led you to understanding a huge aha moment in your business about really explaining the boring part of running an agency, which has actually helped you. And share some more about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, when I kind of first started this journey, of course, we had to come up with a strategy on how we were going to position ourselves in the market and what we were going to talk about. And as I started to evaluate all the different podcasts and all the different blogs and all the different thought leaders, and there's lots of them, thankfully, that are out there helping agencies, I noticed that all of them are talking about the same things, which is essentially how to increase your prices, how to win more proposals, how to get new leads, more leads, more clients, which is obviously the problem that a lot of agencies are struggling with. And nobody is talking about profitability. Very few people are talking about operations and delivery systems. Very few people are talking about how can you, how do you read your financials? What kind of ratio should your payroll be to your income? What ratio should your overhead be? What is the multiple over your average cost per hour that your hourly rate should be?
Yeah.
Like, what are those things? And nobody really had the answers. You had to dig very, very deep. And then you realize that a lot of agency owners were suffering in silence about these things, and they weren't asking these questions, on the internet. Very few people and then it wasn't until I started actually going to events and sitting with people that I figured out that actually, yeah, people have a lot of questions about this stuff. And every once in a while you run into an agency owner that has an MBA or has an uncle that ran a successful agency back in the 80s and explained all of this to them. And then they've kind of become the oracle in the group that everyone gravitates towards. And I thought, well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to be the guy that talks about the unsexy stuff because it's so important. It makes such a big difference and no one's doing it. And so far it's worked out really well.
Yeah. And there's agency owners out there who will gravitate to their niche and their particular industry. But you have to remember that there are your ideal candidate, like your ideal client doesn't want to do this boring work, which your team is really strong at doing. So instead of talking about all the sexy stuff, dig in there and go, what are they challenged with? What can you take from them to make your life easy? And talk about it. Talk about how easy it is for you, because I know a lot of people will go, oh, that is so boring, but you can actually just do the best with it. You can make it very easy for them and show them that, look, this is what we do all day long. We will make your return on investment easy. We will do all this boring stuff, leave it to us, and let's turn it back to you so you can get on with doing what you do best. It's a really, really cool. Now, we talk on agency life. It's not all about the glamour and all about being really good. It is about the mistakes. You've gone through a difficult time there where, I know every agency owner has a side project, if not 7 on the go. I work with them all day long. I know what they're like. And we listened to Gary Vee and he talks about his side hustles and all of that, stay in your job. But tell me the challenge that you came across being an agency owner, trying to satisfy clients while you were trying to build your side project. Talk to me there about a mistake.
Yeah, that's been, of course, that's a challenge. And it's been a challenge for us in 2 ways. The first way is in terms of the product, because when we originally started the company, the arrangement was that Jared and his team were going to build the first version of the product because they build software and they're extremely good at it. And of course that started off and it was going really well. Now, unfortunately for me, unfortunately for Jared, Royal J is doing incredibly well. They're growing. They have amazing clients that they're working with. They're also, pivoting into some other interesting projects. And so naturally what ends up happening in those situations is you have big, important paying clients that are often putting demands on your team. And so it becomes very hard to have consistent attention on the product. And what we know from that experience is that building a software product requires a lot of discipline. It requires a very regular level of attention. It requires a lot of rerouting. It requires a lot of feedback loops because it's very hard to get things right the first time. So there's a lot of iteration that goes on. And so it's not to say that that went poorly, but we just realized that under that kind of an arrangement, without one person or a couple of people that their only job was to live and breathe and sleep thinking about how to make our product amazing, we weren't going to execute at the level that we wanted to build the product that we wanted to offer to the market. So we did that for about a year. And then, we all just kind of agreed, I think it's time to take this to the next level. And so we started looking for and recruiting for a CTO. And there will be an official announcement very soon, but we have a very exciting person that's joining the team, a world-class CTO that, yes, I can't wait to do a press release about that. So, but that was certainly a challenge. And I think a lot of people people listening probably resonate with that. If you've tried to build a product internally or launch an internal project, and then the client fires come up, and then this happens, and then that happens, and you just kind of end up a lot of times dumping random buckets of hours into this thing when times are slow, but never really having the continuity in that project to get it across the finish line. It can be frustrating at times. And I have seen it do damage to a lot of agencies as well when it's not regulated properly. So that was one challenge. And now today, of course, we're still funding a lot of the development through the consulting work that we do.
Right.
And it took me a while to really figure out how to structure and protect my time in order to make that work. So now I've got a fairly good handle on it. I batch all of my consulting work into 1 day a week. I have 1 hour a day where I respond to client emails, and I set expectations for them that, like, don't expect to hear from me within 5 minutes when you email me. If there's an emergency, this is how you get to me, but there aren't emergencies in what I do. So thankfully, that's not a problem.
No, there shouldn't be.
Yeah. So I still have to balance that, but it's been a lot about setting really clear expectations with clients and then protecting that time and being really intentional about how I set up my calendar. I'm a person that goes to the next level with the calendar. All of my personal stuff is also in there. So dates, fitness, and I respect my calendar, because if I have something in there, it's because I've intentionally made time for it. So that's been a game changer for me as well.
Yeah. That's really, you brought up a couple of things there, but I'll bring back to what I have seen with agency owners, the point of, yes, you want to work for yourself, right? This is part of the reason you're not working for the man, that you want to come up with ideas and you want to see them through. But most of the time you might have an idea and you share it with the team, but the team is kind of like, I'm not really excited about this because there was 5 ideas that you started last week and you never finished them. And this is something that is just really simple to do. And I have, what I'll do is I'll make sure the link for the template is actually in here. I've actually solved the problem of coming up with ideas as an agency owner and actually seeing them through to fruition. Now, whether they're launched or not, or whether they actually happen, but if they will get traction, there's I think it's like 26 steps in how to create a new product, service, side project, whatever it is. And you go through the template as an agency owner. Now, it might be really frustrating because we want to just go and talk about the idea and get excited about it. But if you can sit down and map it out, and it covers through internal training material, external training material, buyer persona, who's it for, the who, what, when, where, why. And if you can get that far before you start talking about it, and I would probably recommend hiring someone on Upwork, like outsource the start of that outside of your agency, because it can get really distracting. By we're very creative people, we've got a lot of ideas, but your team wants to be staying in one lane. So it's not like you can't have ideas. It's not that you can't keep coming up with them, writing them down, but there is a mechanism. If you actually want to see if there's something they want to float, give it to someone outside the agency before you bring it back in and actually turn it into something.
Yeah. And I'll add, if you don't mind, a couple of points to that as well. When you are an operationally excellent agency, it becomes a lot easier to do internal projects. And it's because you have so much more control or predictability generally over your client work that's coming in. Like, if you've become really good at scoping it, if you've become really good at resource planning, if you've become really good at hitting budgets because you've gotten the feedback loops in place, you've got good processes, then you can just slot that in as a project, and there shouldn't be that many fires that are going to cause, a situation where you're constantly pulling people on and off of that thing. And you'll also know exactly how much money you're investing into it, because you know your cost per hour, you know how many hours are going into it, and you know the opportunity cost of investing that time in your own thing versus externally. So it becomes a lot easier to assess, if it's worth continuing, if it's worth doing in the first place. And at the end of it, what the ROI was on that project. So being good at operations is kind of a surefire way to make sure that you can protect the time to do that if it's really important to you.
Yeah, perfect. And speaking of time, you said that you locked in everything in your diary. CrossFit is something that, even though you were a coach, you're still doing, and you find it's an important part of helping you stay balanced, keep focused on what you're doing. Talk to me a bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, fitness has always been, for as long as I can remember, since I was just like a little kid, all I ever wanted to do was go outside and play sports with my dad, with my friends around the cul-de-sac. And then as I kind of became a little bit older, part of my personal story is that we had a lot of turbulence in my home. My mom had some pretty severe mental illness and had a brain surgery and had some emotional challenges. My parents split up and there was a lot of violence in that. So there's a period of my life when fitness was the only way for me to really escape this feeling of like walking on eggshells that I felt like I was in for several years. So it became almost a therapeutic thing for me. So it's always been something that's very, very important. And when I suffered a lot of concussions because I, for whatever reason, was drawn to contact sports despite not being a very big guy.
No.
So I had a lot of concussions and had to leave competitive sport right after high school and found CrossFit. And it was really a place that if anyone's ever done CrossFit, you'll kind of understand that there's nothing else really like it out there. It satisfied that competitive edge. It satisfied that sense of camaraderie that I was looking for from having played a lot of team sports. And then becoming a coach, I've always done a lot of coaching. I started coaching fitness when I was in university, actually, doing boot camps with the microphone and like Taibo full out, and then transitioned into coaching CrossFit. What's that?
I remember Taibo.
Yeah. So that was me. I was like a white Billy Blanks at one point in university, and I had a lot of fun doing that. And it's still something that I do. I'm weaning off of it a little bit more because I just need to protect my time and focus on Parakeeto. But it's just a great community. I love to give back to that. And I love empowering people to get fit because I really feel like it's a huge reason why I'm able to do what I do and show up the way that I do every day and have the energy to continue to do the grind and continue to, ride the roller coaster that we're all riding. And so I make sure to protect the 4 or 5 mornings a week, go in, get my sweat on, and make sure that I get that done. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to be the richest guy in the graveyard. That I don't really see a whole lot of point to that. And so it's very important to me to make sure that I can enjoy all of the things that I'm working for.
Yeah, and I think what I've noticed over the last few years, I've worked with lots of agency owners, and I've noticed over the last 7 years, I can see people taking a more interest in their health, in their well-being, maybe going plant-based, maybe trying CrossFit, maybe doing weightlifting, powerlifting, whatever it is. And I think it's been a struggle for us when we're working in a business. We think, oh, we've got to do this for 80 hours, and we don't let ourselves take an hour off to go and walk on the beach, take an hour off and go and do the gym. We think that we should be working every single time. And so giving yourself the permission to go, if I put an hour in here into my fitness, I'm going to get at least another 4 hours out of that. And I would also add meditation onto that. I mean, one of the most powerful things that I've had experience in giving me more energy recently has been 15 minutes meditation in the morning and 15 in the afternoon. It's like having a cup of coffee. And we know we kind of have this thing going, oh, I should work. But really, if we can take that hour of fitness, a walk, anything, and take some time to meditate, it is actually going to give us better work focus, better experiences, and have more energy for everyone else around us. And speaking of which, like your partner, your fiance is an marketing agency as well. So tell me, please, how do you manage the entrepreneurial life, the fact that we want to work for every hour? If I don't have something in the calendar, I'm working.
Yeah.
Tell me how you do a bit more of that balancing work life and a relationship as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's been, it's really truly been a blessing because of how special she is. I feel lucky every single day that I get to be in a relationship with somebody like that. And I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, and I can't really relate to this struggle because the whole time that I've been an entrepreneur, I've been with her and she's also been an entrepreneur. And so we really understand each other. We understand that every once in a while there's going to be a late night, but by contrast, what we have not allowed ourselves to do is just constantly be working and never seeing each other. And so in the same way that I put personal things in my calendar, she does as well. We have a meeting cadence. We have quarterly planning. We have weekly meetings where we treat our relationship like a business, and that has been an absolute game changer. And so we review our calendars, we review our year, we review our goals, we measure KPIs and how we're feeling about, how we're feeling about our relationship, our finances, our spirituality, our hobbies, our health, and we basically just are constantly checking in with each other, and we have a rhythm for our relationship. And I think that works well for us because we're both used to that in our business and we understand the value of it. So we bring it to our relationship. And so, yeah, for that reason, it's worked out really well. But it really comes down to just not being afraid to add some structure to our relationship, in the same way that we add structure to our business, because it's a priority. And so we have to make it a priority. We have to put time in the calendar and protect it. And in doing that, it holds us accountable. Because I think as well as I do, if I know that I have a date on Friday night at 6:00 and I have something to get done, I'm going to do everything I can to get it done before 6:00. But if I don't have anything at 6, I'll probably just keep working till 8, because that's what we do. We want to play the game, right?
Yeah. We'll stop and eat and then we'll go, oh, I've nothing to do. I'll just keep working. It's so funny. Yeah. Now we've talked for a long time. So thank you, Marcel, for this. I'm going to ask you for one extra thing. And it's interesting that we actually have the same sort of methodology or thought process around this. When I worked in HubSpot, I used to say to agency owners, look, it's great that you've joined HubSpot, but really nobody else cares. And by the way, you know too much, because even if you just read the HubSpot blog for 6 months, you know way more than the average person on the street. So this is something I just love that you mentioned about agencies are suffering from indigestion, not starvation, and they can't tell the difference. Tell me more about some advice you would give to agencies out there now.
Yeah, that's a funny thing. I see this all the time, right? A lot of agency owners are probably maybe going through this now, or if you've gone through this before, you remember a time where you're like, we're so busy, I'm working my butt off, and you look at your bank account and you're like, why is there no money in here?
Yeah,
this doesn't make any sense. And then they think it's because, well, we need more business. So you go out and you sell, not realizing that your problem is indigestion. What I mean by that is you're selling work. Generally, this happens when you get into a situation where you have overhead, you need to do whatever it takes to get the revenue in to pay the bills, but you're not efficient at earning that revenue. And that's the part that a lot of people are not looking at. How much time does it take me to earn this revenue that we just brought into the door? And that makes a difference because your team has a finite amount of time in a week, in a month, in a quarter. And so when you're not paying attention to those things, then you can try to solve your problem by selling more product and selling more revenue. But the way that the business is structured, you actually might be exacerbating the problem. And so a lot of times what I see in agency is they're doing too many different types of work. So there's a high level of risk associated with the projects they're doing because they don't have any kind of expertise or visibility into the scope, into the process, into how they're going to get the client from point A to point B and get them the outcome. They have tons of overruns. Of course, they underprice it a lot of the time. And so my recommendation is, and I think that there's an unhealthy narrative right now around niching in the industry. I think that a lot of people should niche on a service basis or on a vertical basis. But I think at the end of the day, everybody should pick a problem and get good at solving that problem. And sometimes that problem is solved by being a full service agency. And sometimes it's solved by just doing one thing really, really well. But if you focus on solving one problem and then you figure out what the process is to solve that problem repeatably, getting the outcome to the client in a way that they're happy with. And then you can start to actually create systems inside of your business to do the delivery consistently, take reasonable amounts of time, protect your profit margins, schedule your resources appropriately, and the indigestion starts to calm itself. But when your diet is too diverse in your agency, then a lot of times you can start to get some uncomfortableness. So that's what I mean when I say that. And a lot of people, like I said, they can't tell the difference. And it's hard to watch them go down that path because a lot of times if they're good at sales, they can just drive the car right off the cliff without even noticing that it's happening.
Yeah, they say things like, yes, we can add that new service into it. I'm sure it's easy, but not, again, if I go back to the 26 steps of introducing a new product or service into your agency, if it hasn't been fleshed out and it hasn't been scoped properly, in their heads, they think, yes, we can do that. And yes, technically the software that they're selling perhaps it can be one of those, just tick the box or slide the bar over to activate. So in their heads, they're like, oh yeah, I just, we'll slide that over. We can add that in, not realizing how many steps, how many processes, how many things need to be done with the services team to actually execute that properly, when the services team haven't even learned about or watched the video or watched the training or done the certifications on it. So I love that, just to talk about really, really understand that you are in the professional services business. It is very complex. Taking on services and projects and understanding time, it's not to be taken lightly. So great advice. If you can fix one problem and fix it well for one particular niche, and even just one particular type of person that you like to work with, you're doing a great job. You can build a great business. Brilliant. Thank you.
Are there going to be show notes on this podcast?
Yes, there's going to be show notes. Yeah, we type them up.
Is it cool? Is it cool if I talk about some resources that people can go and reach out to if they want to learn more about profitability and get some benchmarks and stuff?
Please, absolutely. We'll include the links as well. So tell me more about that, and we'll pop them in there, and then we'll wrap it up and say goodbye. So give us some gold.
Awesome. So there's some recordings of some full trainings that I've done around, those 3 KPIs that I talked about earlier, but I dig deeper into the benchmarks, what kind of numbers you should be shooting for, how you can actually measure your own agency to figure out how that's going. So we'll leave links to that in the show notes. And then I'll also leave a link to a cheat sheet that has all of the kind of key metrics you should be tracking in your agency, the benchmarks and the formulas, so that you can kind of get started on doing that on your own. And in that, there'll be links to spreadsheets and stuff. So I really just want to make sure that if you're listening to this and you think you should be tracking your metrics, I want to give you everything that you need to start doing it on your own without spending money on anything, because I just really believe it's so, so important and it can make such a big difference. So I hope that that's the takeaway at the end of this, that you go in, just explore this a little more.
That is fantastic. And we can find you at parakeeto.com. What's the best one? What's your favorite? My personal is if somebody messages me on Instagram. I'm just an Instagram person at the moment. What's the best way to get in touch with you, Marcel?
The best way is definitely to either add me on LinkedIn or add me on Facebook. Those are the only 2 things that I still have notifications turned on my phone for, which I still debate about whether I should do that or not. Of course, Parakeeto.com is there, or my website, Marcel@marcelpetitpas.com. You can email me there. So my contact information is all over the internet. Just Google me. There's not that many people with my name out there that wear this shirt. I wear the same shirt everywhere, all my profile pictures. So yeah, those would be the good spots.
I love it. And if I see anything with a parakeet on it, I'm going to be sending it to you. Marcel, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for this interview. I will see you very soon, and goodbye everyone, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks a million.